Thank you very much, Darren, and good evening, everybody. The fifth installment of our kind of pole vault coaching look at how I kind of think about pole vault is going to be on pole technique, which is essentially what happens, once the athlete is off the ground and onto the pole. As Darren said, a lot to get through this evening, but it's the exciting part of the jump, right? As coaches, we love this bit. It's the bit where all the excitement happens. It's very dramatic. It's very interesting. So we're going to look at a lot of videos. It's going to be a lot of fun and hopefully very informative as we go along as well. So just a quick recap then on our critical determinants model. Remember, vault height is a product of grip and push. And on the push height side of the model, we talked about pole stiffness and how important that is at the last kind of sitting. And then tonight, we're going to look at on-pole technique and how that influences push height and ultimately the height that athletes vault. So that's going to be how we consider on-pole technique. I'm going to break it down into three kind of subsections, as I've done with most of the other presentations. We're going to look at the entry to the pole and the flight phase, or creating the C. A lot of that we've kind of already touched on, either at the end of takeoff efficiency, because all of these phases kind of link together and they blend into one. They're not discrete. They're much more integrated than that. So a lot of that we'll have covered there, or during on-pole stiffness. So that'll just be a quick recap on creating the C. And then we'll spend a lot of time on that middle block talking about the swing and the invert and all the nuances therein. And then at the end, then I'll wrap up by talking a bit about the turn, the pole exit, and the bar clearance. So those are going to be our three major headings as we go through this evening. So that first little block then on pole entry and creating the flight, three things we need to think about during that time. We've got to create pole speed or rotation to make sure that pole gets to the vertical. We need to make sure that the pole starts to flex and open and compress. And then we need to get the athlete in the right position to swing effectively on the pole. So quick, we saw this slide on pole stiffness. The things that we need to bear in mind is this double pendulum system that goes on, which is the speed of the pole rotating around the pole tip in the box. That's pendulum 1, and that's the amount of pole speed that we have. Then we have the athlete swinging around their hands on the top of the pole, and that's pendulum number 2, and that's the athlete's swing speed, and that's our traditional double pendulum model. But as I pointed out last time, we also need to consider the amount of time that the athlete has available for getting into various positions and completing their actions on the pole, which is essentially the amount of time it takes for the pole to compress to maximum pole bend and then straighten again to pole straight. So those things just keep in the back of your mind as we go through. So impact of on-pole technique on pole speed. I wanted to start here. So the energy that we add early on in the swing phase, which we can add energy early in the swing, gives a bigger compression on the pole. It shortens the chord and therefore gives us faster pole speed if we shorten the chord more. I'll explain more about that a little bit later. But it also gives the athlete more time because the pole is compressing deeper and longer. You have more time to maximum pole bend. So that's quite useful to know. So we want to add energy in because all of those things I've just explained are good things. It's also important to keep in mind in terms of the pole speed, what the metronome principle is all about. So for people from a musical background will know what a musical metronome is, a timekeeping device or a rhythm-keeping device that ticks backwards and forwards with a sliding mass on the main kind of lever in the middle. And the closer you move the mass to the pivot, the faster the metronome goes. And the further you move the mass from the pivot, the slower the metronome goes. And it's exactly the same when we think about the pole. So if the athlete moves more mass lower down in the system and keeps it there for longer, they can increase their amount of pole speed because they've moved mass towards the pivot, i.e. down towards the bung. And the ways that they can do that is that they can delay their swing and they can stay down in the pole system for longer. And they could also drop their free leg. They can drop their knee down, which drops mass towards the pivot. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just explaining that that's the effect of doing it. It's also worth bearing in mind that a lot of the time when we see these things happening in the vault, when we see athletes that delay their swing or stay down for too long or drop their knee, it's actually either, they're doing it deliberately because at the very highest level, they're doing it because they know it will help them turn over a higher grip because they're really pushing their grip height boundaries. or at perhaps more novice level, it's a compensatory mechanism because they've had experiences where they've either been over gripping or they haven't taken off efficiently enough for their grip. And the only way then to get the pole to turn over and make the vertical is to start compensating and doing these things. Otherwise, if they swing and go early, they're just going to land on the wing or land in the box, which they, ultimately nobody wants to do. And no athletes are stupid. They figure this stuff out pretty quickly, and then they compensate for that during their kind of flight phase strategy. Of course, the converse of this is also true. If the athlete swings early and moves their body mass high into the system, it slows the pole speed down. And we kind of saw that with Lazaro Borges when we looked at his jump last time, how he's such an early swinger and gets so high in the system so early, his pole actually came up pretty short of vertical when we watched him jump. And that's just a reason for that happening, is because the mass moved so high so quickly, the metronome, the pole lever in the box, just slows down. Now, we're going to have a quick look at a video of a young lady who does drop her lead leg. I'm not going to say too much more than that, but just this plays a few times at different speeds. Just have a look at it. I'm not advocating this technique, but it's important that we understand what's happening and why it's happening. Just for kind of context, this lady is around 50 kilos body weight, so she's very light. She's only about 162 tall. She's very short, but she's jumped over 4.60 meters. This is her at European under-23s back in 2007, and she effectively has to jump this way to compensate for the fact that she's capping out a 430 pole in order to achieve those sorts of heights. So anyway, have a look at this, and then once we've had a look at it, we'll talk through it. Jump number 1. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Right, this plays a few times, so just bear with me. Hold on, it didn't start at the beginning. Let me go back. Here we go. So she actually jumps really nicely on the pole, but the takeoff is wild. So watch what she does. It plays a few times. Look at this, what she does through this takeoff. All right. And so if it wasn't clear already based on the kind of metronome principle that I just talked about, what she's doing is she's leaving her free leg at takeoff here behind her, and then she's double leg swinging through the bottom of the jump. And then she actually times up the rest of the jump beautifully because she's an ex-gymnast. She's a great jumper. But the reason that she's doing that is, as I've kind of alluded to, she has to. She's keeping mass down in the system at the start of the jump, and she's using a double leg swing to swing that extra mass of both legs through the bottom of the jump. And I don't want to say much more than that, but she's doing that deliberately to ensure that she gets enough pole speed to turn the pole over and get it into the pit. So we've had a quick look at Kirashova's jump there. So that's just, again, I'm not advocating that, but it's important that we understand why that happens. Ultimately, what we're trying to do with this flight phase is we're trying to set up the swing, and by doing that, we have to get into what I call, or what everybody calls, the C position, which you can see here is this position where if we draw a line from everybody's top hand down through their shoulder, through their hip, out through their trail leg, and through their knee and ankle, we've got this beautiful C position. And we talked about that a lot in takeoff efficiency and moving through the pole and into that position, which we saw from these 4 athletes here. Now, why is that C position so important? Again, in terms of the takeoff efficiency, what it does is it aids penetration. If you don't drive in underneath the hands and go inside the pole, and you block and you push your left arm forwards, it actually prevents your body mass from moving forwards inside the system. So by going inside and driving into that C position, it actually aids penetration towards the 0 line and getting the pole turned over. Secondly, and more importantly for this presentation, is that it actually distributes the athlete's body mass underneath their point of support, i.e. their hands. So they're underneath the pivot, and that is critical for setting up a swinging action, particularly on a moving pole. And then thirdly, that C position creates a lot of muscular stretch and tension through the anterior chain, through the front of the body. So from the chest down through the abdominals and into the takeoff leg hip flexors. But we can then use that stretch and that tension in an elastic way to create a whipping action or a tapping action, very much like a gymnastics movement, which for me is all about setting up the swing. And that's how you create a really harmonious swinging vault, as opposed to a muscled lifting kind of a vault that fights against the pole. And we can learn a lot. I've just mentioned gymnastics. We can learn a lot from gymnastics in this space. So if we consider the gymnastics long swing as a base, you can see in this diagram here, on the bottom left of the diagram, the athlete is starting to move into a very small, albeit subtle, C position, leading with the chest as they come through the bottom of the bar, and then the legs follow through. And that's exactly the same as it should look on the pole. So I've got a couple of videos now to emphasize this. So let me go back to my video menu. Video number 2, where are you? I know you're here somewhere, video number 2. I have a lot of videos tonight, guys. So here we go, here's video number 2, got it? So this is just the basic long swing on the high bar. A lot of people have seen this before, and as this gymnast starts to wind it up more and more and more, flex kick, creating a little bit of stretch at the bottom, and then kick, flex and kick, flex and kick. Really nice. So some just basic long swing progressions there on the high bar, but you can start to see that kind of stretching action through the front of the body, and then the reaction of that is an elastic kick and whip. And then if I just show you this Stromo quickly of that action, you can really see it vividly there. I'll play that a couple of times. Just before the gymnast goes through the bottom of the bar, you can see, oh, what's happening here? Hold on, my video stopped playing. Oh, here we go. We're off. There we go. So he's going continuously now. And you can see just before he gets to the bottom of the bar on the Stromo, the chest goes through the bottom of the swing first. Chest, and then the rest of the body follows. It's creating that whipping, kicking action through the bottom of the swing. And we can use that in pole vault. Cool. So that's about getting into the right position to create the swing, getting into that C position. Now let's move on to the swing and invert. And just before we kind of get into the detail, I just want to highlight some really key positions that are talked about a lot in terms of pole vault analysis that just want to make really clear. So we have, in terms of athlete positions, we have the C position, which we've just talked about. Then we have the L position, where they're in the kind of L shape over the top of the pole. We'll see that in a minute. Then the I position, then we have pole release. Athlete and pole together, we have a position where they swing through the cord of the pole. That's going to become really important as we go on. And then in terms of key positions with the pole, we have maximum pole bend, which we already talked about last week, and then when the pole returns to its straight position at the end of the swing. So just looking at where those occur in a vault sequence, this is Bubka. The yellow box and the red box are him in his C position and then initiating his swing. The green box there is when he's swinging through the cord. So we have a straight line from the top hand down through the shoulder, through the hip, and through the trail leg to the foot. And then that straight line points directly into the bottom of the box. That's swinging through the cord. The blue box, then, the pole is at maximum pole bend. That's the maximum amount of compression that the pole experiences. And then after that point, it starts to straighten again. And then the purple box in the bottom right of the screen, that's the L position. You can see that Bubka is in this kind of quite distinctive capital L shape with his feet over the top of his hands. If we continue that sequence for Bubka, the orange box in the middle of the top row, that's the I position. You can understand why. The body is now fully extended. And then in the next frame in the blue box, that's the first frame where the pole is completely straight. So at this point, the pole is finished recoiling, bang, it's in the straight position by that frame. And then the green box in the bottom left, that's actually the first frame where Bubka releases the pole. His right hand is off the pole there. You can just see it's released. So that's pole release for Bubka. Exactly the same on the women's side, just a slightly different timing. This is Isinbayeva. Sorry if the images are a bit small there, guys, but hopefully you can see it all right. Yellow box is the C position, bottom left. Green box in the middle of the bottom row, that's Isinbayeva swinging through the cord of the pole, straight line through the body, pointing down into the bottom of the box. Then we go to blue in the top left. That's the maximum pole bend. Lovely pole compression on the pole there for Isinbayeva. And then onto the purple box, she has an amazing L position there. That's absolute textbook L position over the top of the pole. Orange, she's in the I position. You can see her body completely straight there. And then for Isinbayeva, she doesn't release the pole till she's actually over the bar. That's kind of a big difference between the energy outputs on men's vaulting and women's vaulting right now. She's actually over the bar before she lets go of the stick. So those are our key positions. Just wanted to flag that before we kind of get going, because I'm going to be talking about them and I didn't want anybody to kind of be unclear on that. So let's start with then the first part of the swing, which is when the takeoff foot changes direction and starts to swing through the bottom of the jump to the cord of the pole. And that's where the athlete, from being in that C position, basically realigns their body to a straight position. So moving from that C position to the cord serves two functions. It sets up a swinging action on the pole. The C position starts it, and then the initiation, that first part of the swing, sets up the rest of the swing to come later. And it contributes massively to pole compression, which means there's an opportunity through that swinging action to add energy to the pole. Excuse me. So again, just looking at what we can learn from gymnastics, we know that in the long swing, there's muscular work that goes on at the shoulder, hip, and knee joints, and that creates force for the swing action, but also it creates force at the bar. And that's important for us to understand in terms of application for pole vault and loading the pole. So in the middle of those, don't worry too much about this, in the middle of those equations, there's energy transferred between the gymnast and the bar during long swings in gymnastics. And there's a reason for that. And if we look at this next montage, this is a series of much bigger long swings leading into dismounts. What am I on now? Number 4. Video number 4. We have 24 videos tonight, guys. It's a lot. It took a long time to get this ready, but it's going to be worth it. So here's a long swing montage. The first bit is 2 different gymnasts. This one with a little bit of a kip and then a triple back that he lands short. This is with a massive kip. Watch this. And bang. Woofed. We're going to watch each of those again. So little kip, triple back, and then big kip through the bottom. Here it comes, bang, triple back, almost goes through the roof, almost overcooks it. We're going to watch that a couple of times. Watch the shape that he creates in a minute here. Chest first, big C, bang. Easy. Now watch what happens with the bar. Watch the bar. Did you see how much the bar flexed when he did that? He goes chest in, big kip through the bottom, loads the bar with energy. Again, if we do that kick right through the bottom of the swing, not only do we create a lot of energy for the vaulter swinging, in this case the gymnast swinging, but we also load the bar, or in the vault case, the pole, with energy as well. And you can see the result, like I say, almost goes through the roof. So that's the benefit of setting up the swing correctly, the amount of energy that you can create for rotation about the hands, but also the energy that's then imparted via the hands onto the implement that's being used. And if we look at the Stromo one more time, number 5, where are you, number 5? If we look at the Stromo one more time, it becomes really apparent, during a much more aggressive long swing, how much the chest is leading. So look at the bottom of the screen when I do that. Put repeat on. Look how much the chest is leading and leaving the feet behind, creating that kind of C and then whipping through the bottom of the swing. Okay, that's a really aggressive gymnastics maneuver that, again, we can learn from in the vault. Great. Now I cannot find the presentation. I can. Just kidding. Here we go. Right. So we've been through long swings. Now, setting up the swing then. So the takeoff in the vault, the takeoff leg kicking and whipping through the bottom is absolutely the key. And for me, it's about doing so quickly and dynamically as soon as possible after takeoff. And I actually monitor the time between the foot leaving the ground at takeoff and then the time between that and when the foot changes direction and goes from moving backwards in the takeoff to then kicking and moving forwards as part of the swing. And you can only do that safely if you have set up enough pole speed to get to the pole to the vertical. As I've already said, if you swing early and move mass high in the system and you haven't done that, the pole's going to come up short and then you get into danger. But if you've moved the pole well and you do swing early, that's what creates great timing between athlete and pole. And for me, that's about using the speed that we have at that moment in time. The speed's gone into the pole from the runway, the athlete's driven inside, and we can use that speed as part of the whip and go sequence to really create great swing speeds. Next point here, and this isn't I agree with this wholeheartedly, but it's not my work. But Brian Clymer has done some really nice interpretation of Petrov's work with 3 videos that are on YouTube. Go and look it up. Put in Brian Clymer pole vault technique into YouTube and have a look at and watch his 3 videos. Do it on mute because the music in the background's not the best. But go and have a watch of his videos. They're really informative. But all it kind of essentially centers around is not closing the shoulder angle on the top arm and rowing the pole forwards. That is an absolute disaster. It kills the swing. and it creates a muscular lift in the vault. The closing of this shoulder angle happens because the trunk moves up towards the arm, not because the arm cranks forwards towards the body. It should be a reflexive swing, not a muscular lift. So don't row the pole. That's a disaster for us. And the vault ultimately should be as long as possible through the first part of the swing up until the point where they go through the chord. Two reasons. One, it creates large amounts of angular momentum because they're in a long body position that they can use later in the swing in terms of velocity. And it also, through that long body position, like with the gymnast on the high bar, it gives loads and loads of load onto the pole. And creates, the bending on the high bar, but also the bending on the pole because we have loads of angular momentum compressing the pole with a long body. So just very quickly then, in case people are a bit confused about what I mean when I talk about the chord of the pole, I just wanted to throw this diagram up, which really clearly shows how the chord of the pole changes length throughout the jump. And it starts off from the top hand to the bung when the pole is straight at the length or the height of the grip. And then at the end of the jump, it returns to the same position. But in the middle of the jump at maximum pole bend, the chord has shortened quite a lot, normally by about around kind of 70% of its original length. It shortens. And because of that shortening of the pole, that helps the higher grips roll forwards and roll through the vertical. So we want that. We want to kick through the chord of the pole and get that pole to kind of shorten up until maximum pole bend as much as we can. And we can see here a great shot of Isinbayeva with a really long body position. You can see how this takeoff leg here is blurry because she's kicking it so hard and fast, and she's right on the chord of the pole there going down into the box with a completely straight body position. And you can see the amount that's loading the pole. The pole's really loading up when she does that, swinging through the chord of the pole. And I'm going to show a video of a few people now who display some great characteristics in terms of some of the stuff that I've just talked about, the early swing and the long body swing through the pole. So we'll start with this in Isinbayeva because I've just shown her. This is a 490 jump, but I want you to watch, we're going to watch it a couple of times, how fast her takeoff leg changes direction. Take off, boom, and it's gone. It's not, it's reflexive. It's just stretch, boom, and the takeoff foot's kicking through the bottom of the jump. She doesn't have to wait. She can just go straight away. Let's watch it one more time. My video stalled. Hold on, let it buffer. Come on. Here we go. And kick, and she's gone. Yeah, and she doesn't break or bunch. It's just a really nice long swing through the chord of the pole. Right, so that was Isinbayeva. Let's have a look at Tarasov doing this, because he does this really well as well. So watch how fast that takeoff leg changes direction. Wham, and it's gone. And he's a tall guy. Tarasov was like 6'5", and so he just kicks so long through the chord of the pole. Amazing. Watch it one more time. Watch that takeoff leg change direction fast and swing through the chord at the bottom of the jump. Oh, the buffer on this is just killing me. Let's watch one more time. Give it a second. Here we go. Wham. I mean, the takeoff leg's blurry. It moves so fast. Incredible. Who else have we got? Mondo. Let's have a look at how fast Mondo swings on his world record jump. Here he comes. Here's Mondo, 618. I mean, we all love watching that jump, but just watch the speed at which he swings at the bottom after takeoff. Hit, go. I mean, the guy's just gone. He does a tuck and shoot. I'll talk more about the difference between a tuck and a shoot and a straight leg swing in a bit. Don't worry about that right now. Just watch the speed at with which he initiates at the bottom of the jump. Let's watch it one more time. Mine buffered again. I missed the bit that I really want to look at. That's upsetting. Give it 2 seconds. Come on, video. All right, now try. Now, I keep missing the start of it. Hopefully you guys could see it, but he initiates really fast. And then one more I want to just put up is Harry Capel, who does this unbelievably well. This is the key to Harry's good jumping, but this is all taught by his very first coach, John Mitchell, and Harry together figured this out. But Harry's swing speed is just amazing. Like, he does not wait at the bottom of his jump at all. As soon as the pole touches the back of the box, his takeoff leg is going and he's swinging through the bottom. That's his 580 jump from indoors. And just look, hit, bang, and he's gone. That takeoff leg just whips through super fast at the bottom, stays long through the chord of the pole, and he's gone. Absolutely amazing stuff. Right. That's the next 4 videos. And we're on. Okay, so the key points then that hopefully I've already made, but just to recap in terms of the first part of the swing phase, the hands are the pivot point at this moment in time. We have to get underneath them to start with into the C position, and then we initiate the swing about the hands. So we're hanging and swinging around the hands. That's initiated with a strong, fast leg kick or whip from the takeoff foot as soon as possible after takeoff, and that takeoff foot changing direction quickly at the bottom is key. At this point, we're hanging on the hands. We're not cranking and rowing forwards, and we're not pulling into the pole in any way. We're just hanging on the hands like a gymnast would on a high bar. And although that top arm will realign from being in a big stretch in a C position, it's a reactive realignment. It's not an active crank on the pole. We're not trying to row the pole forwards. And then the last thing is, and we'll see this in an image of Isenbayeva in a minute, the leg kick starts to draw the hips forwards in a swing. We do not want to pike early and see the hips traveling backwards in the swing. The takeoff leg has to take the hips forwards with it. So here we have Yelena on the left of the screen in the C position, absolutely beautiful C position. Her mass is underneath her bottom hand. She's gone that far inside the pole, and you can see her shoulder joint and her hip joint are actually distributed on that vertical line underneath her bottom hand. Amazing position. But then from there, the shoulder joint stays pretty much underneath the bottom hand. But what's happened is she's whipped the takeoff leg through, and that's taken the hips forwards in relation to the shoulder joint with it. And she's right on the chord of the pole here again in that really long body position with that foot blurring a little bit. That C, kick and whip through to the chord, couldn't be better displayed than in those two photos there. And she's not cranking and rowing that top arm forwards. Look how much that top arm is behind the body. That's what we want to see at that point in time, a long body position hanging off the top arm. Next little bit then, we're at the chord of the pole. I'm going to do this quite sequentially, but bear in mind this is obviously just a flowing movement, but we're at the chord of the pole, and then I want to talk about what happens from the chord of the pole through to maximum pole bend. Okay, so this is the second part of the swing phase. First thing is the point of rotation changes slightly now. We've been swinging at the bottom through the hands, but at this point we need to then allow the rotation to translate into the shoulder joint. The way that that happens is that the hip starts to flex to around about 90 degrees, and the pelvis rotates backwards and pulls the kind of legs up with it as it does so. During this time, the chest also hollows out, like a hollowing gymnastics position in this direction here, and the chin stays down. That puts the athlete in a strong position as they swing and start to swing up on the pole. As a result of all of that, the trunk rotates upwards, led by the legs, but with the hips following them and the rotation happening about the shoulder joint. And at this point in time, it's still just a hanging on the top arm. We're still not trying to row the pole forwards. We're swinging the trunk up to meet the top arm, not vice versa. So I want to show a little video of Bubka doing this phenomenally well in his first ever 6-meter jump. So we're up to jump number 10. Here we go. This is a little montage I've put together where it replays this a few times so we can really see it. So think about some of the things that I've just said, guys, in terms of what we're looking for from the chord of the pole, the swing starting to flex at the hip, rotating the pelvis, hollowing the chest out, and the rotation changing to the shoulder axis. Just watch this. Flex, hollow, rotate. It slows down in a minute so we can have a real good look at it. He does flex his takeoff leg a little bit, but not very much. He's pretty much on a straight leg swing, Bubka. But you can see that pelvis rolling under really nicely, it drawing the hips up with it and rotating around the shoulder joint. Beautiful sequence. So what are we trying to do by the time we get to maximum pole bend? This isn't the L position yet. This is just where the pole is at maximum compression. Firstly, we want to get as much mass as high in the system as possible and as close to the hands as we can, i.e. the pivot point. So the key landmarks, which I've drawn on this picture here at maximum pole bend, is that we want the hips higher than the shoulders at the point of maximum pole bend. So we want to see this yellow line that I've drawn here angled upwards, which it is a lot for Bubka. Bubka's a genius at this. So at that point of maximum pole bend, his hip axis is higher than his shoulder axis. That's exactly what we want. We want it above parallel. And also his center of mass position, which is this red dot here, we want that center of mass as high as possible in the system and as close to the pivot as we can, which again, It's amazing how high he's managed to get his center of mass at that moment in time. This sets up the rest of his jump from here. Also, the top arm position has to stay behind vertical. You can see the yellow line here is way, way, way back behind the vertical position. That is also key. He's not cranked it forwards. He's not rode the pole forwards. If he does, the pole unloads and it starts to move forwards and it spits the vaulter out towards the bar. That's not what we want. We want that top arm to stay back behind the vertical. And finally, we have to, what I call, operate inside the bend. The pole has to stay in front of the vaulter at this point in time. And again, you can see Bubka does this beautifully. The pole is bending in towards the pit, and this red arrow shows you how much room he's got between his butt and the pole. There's a huge gap there, and that's paramount to success. It keeps the pole rolling in towards the pit, and it keeps the athlete in the energy kind of zone of the pole. It stops them getting separated from the pole. We see a lot when athletes are worried about the pole not making the vertical, they take the pole for a right-hander out to the left. The bend swings left aggressively early, sometimes even coming around the back of the jump. As soon as that happens, one, the pole's coming up short of the vertical, for sure. You can't avoid it. Secondly, is the vaulter is definitely going to separate out away from the pole, and both those things are a disaster. So the pole bend has to stay in front, and the vaulter has to stay operating and working inside the bend. As I said earlier, whether you use a tuck and shoot method or a swinging straight leg method at this point in time, I'm not too precious about. Ultimately, you're trying to, that's about the style that the vaulter uses, and it's a bit of a trade-off between energy gained by shooting out of a tuck position rather than distributing the mass a little bit higher earlier in the jump. But ultimately, the principles stay the same. We're trying to get as much mass as high as we can in the system by maximum pole bend. And if we can, fulfilling all those other criteria that I've just met, even if the left leg, the takeoff leg for a right-hander, starts to flex and bend and bunch inside a little bit. So once the pole is at maximum pole bend, it's then going to start to recoil and start to straighten again. And the athlete then has to try and time up with that recoiling pole. And that's where their inversion starts. So it's, for me, absolutely essential that before the pole really starts to rocket and take off and gather velocity, that the athlete gets on top of the bend. And in order to get kind of on top of the bend, they've got to do certain things in order to get into that position that's already begun way before this. Swinging early, distributing as much mass as high as possible by maximum pole bend, but they need to finish it off by getting into an L position where their feet ultimately are over the back of their hands. And we'll have a look at that in a minute. If they can do that and they can get on top of the bend, what happens is when the pole recoils, it pushes the vaulter upwards rather than the alternative, which is if they're still hanging underneath the pole, it pulls them upwards and ultimately projects them out towards the pit, which is a big, for a performance perspective and push height, it's a disaster. So firstly, they've got to cover the pole in the L position with the legs as soon as they can after maximum pole bend. The pole's going to be coming. It's not going to wait. And then once they're in the L position, they have to extend the body really dynamically in line with the extending pole. And remember, the more the pole, the stiffer the pole, the more aggressively the pole is coming back, the faster the athlete's going to have to be to get in time with it. In order to extend effectively, it's about pushing the feet backwards over the top of the hands as the hips continue to rise and roll up. It's about the body and the arm closing off now and closing that gap between the body and the arm and squeezing that gap nice and tight so that there's no separation. And then lastly, the shoulders drop and align with the body and the pole. And that's where we see that I position at the end of the invert. So little bit of video to support what I've just said. We're going from maximum pole bend through the L position and then into the I position. Okay. Clip number 11. Where are you? I know you're here. Got ya. Okay. Here we go. So, boom, boom. He's pushing the feet over the back of the hands, L position. And then as soon as he does that, he's squeezing the arm close to the body and dropping the shoulders. Closes the gap, drops the shoulders, squeeze, and he rolls the hips upwards, feet over the back, L position, drops the shoulders, hips up. The gap between the body and the arm closes off, the shoulders drop, and we finish in a beautiful I position where he's past vertical, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Doesn't get much better than that. So Oh, I've gone too far. First thing then, the L position. What are we looking for? We've gone past maximum pole bend. You can see the pole in this image has already started to recoil, but we're resisting that at this stage, and the pole's not moving too quickly. So we've got opportunities to get into position. So Bubka has covered now the bend really well with his legs, and his feet are pushed back over the top of his hands. You can see how much from maximum pole bend his hips have continued to roll up, and this is a big problem. This is where a lot of athletes get stuck and they get trapped with their hips low. He's still hanging on that right arm. It's still behind the vertical. It's not cranked forwards. It's still just hanging out in that L position, which is perfect. He's still operating inside the bend. He hasn't let the pole whip out to the left. He's still inside the bend, and his chin is down. And I know a lot of people have been watching Sam jump recently and showing him throwing his head back. He's found a way to make that work, but he's an anomaly. Despite his amazing push height, he's found a way to make that work. But you generally stay in a stronger position with your chin down rather than with your head back. That's a weaker position, my opinion. And then we move on to the I position. So you can see now that there's no gap between the body and the top arm. That gap's closed completely. Even though his feet are apart a little bit, he's got great leg tension in his legs, and his shoulders have dropped underneath and aligned with the rest of the body, and his head is in line with the spine. He's not thrown his head back. His head just finds a natural alignment with the spine. Pelvis is neutral, which means energy coming back just gets pumped right into the rest of his body. And actually, if you look at the angle of the uprights in this video, his body's actually angled away from the vertical. He's come so far over the top of this that he's actually angled away from the vertical, but he's got so much pole speed still that he will still travel across the bar without fear of landing short. And that's the key. So let's have a look at a couple of other people that are great, have got great inversions. And by great inversions, I mean L position, maximum pole bend going through L position and then dynamically shooting up in line with the pole to that I position. Okay. The first one of those we're going to have a look at is a guy by the name of Bjorn Otto. He's a German vaulter, and he's so aggressive through this phase. This is what makes his jump so good. So we'll watch this a couple of times. This is Otto jumping 582. Watch here, and then boom. I mean, it's just incredible how he rips through the top of the jump there and lines up with the pole. Let's watch it again because it's that good. So he gets into maximum pole bend, L, and then woof. I mean, it's so aggressive and it's so dynamic, and he's got one of the best push heights ever. We'll see that at the end. And he's also on a super stiff pole, so he's got to be aggressive through that phase of the jump. Somebody else that does this really, really well is Steve Hooker. And I want to have a look at a Hooker jump from short approach, which was a bit of an internet sensation a few years ago, because Hooker in this video jumps 561 from 8 steps, which is just mind-boggling in itself. But the key is he's just so aggressive on the pole. Oof. I mean, the push height on that jump is phenomenal because he's only on short run and low grip. But again, look how aggressive he is through the top of the jump. It's just amazing. Once he gets to that L position, drives the feet over the top, oof, and just takes off in line with the pole. The synchronization between him and the pole is absolutely out of this world, and that's the key to on-pole work. Synchronization between the vaulter and the pole. This was just a really cool photo that I've had in my library for ages that I thought was perfect for this presentation. This is a South American vaulter, Dalis Calabrero. I think I said that correctly. I hope I did. And yeah, look at that for an invert. Shoulders underneath, perfectly aligned, feet away from the bar, still loads of bend on the pole. Absolutely incredible position to be able to get into and exploit. Just thought I'd drop that in there. Anyway, that's the swing and the invert. Hopefully that gives a flavor of my thoughts around what we're looking for in terms of creating a great swing through the bottom and then rolling up into invert through the top of the jump. Then we move on seamlessly into the turn, pole, exit, and bar clearance, which again, broken down into 3 components. First of which is the turn, and this is the opportunity the vaulter has to really exploit the energy return of the pole. The pole's now starting to really project the vaulter and accelerate them upwards. So in order to make the most of that, the athlete needs to turn along the line of the pole and stay really close to it. As soon as we get separation, the energy that's coming up through the pole doesn't hit into the mass of the athlete and accelerate them. It doesn't matter how strong you are with your arms, you need to keep your mass on the pole so that the recoiling pole pushes the mass upwards. Separation is no good. As soon as the athlete has finished extending into the I position, the turn should happen immediately. It's a continuation of movement L to I into the turn. For me, there's no point in keeping back to the bar for longer than that, because one, you missed an opportunity to get mass on the runway side of the pole, but also it puts you in a really weak position to turn on the pole. We've got to get that shoulder turned in before the hands move past the face. Whether you cue an athlete to turn through their feet, hips, shoulders, or hands, play around with that. I've had success with all of them in terms of how an athlete thinks about turning. And I think it comes from, some sort of gymnastic awareness, how they like to turn, but all of them can be effective. So I have no kind of method for that, but just play around with different concepts. But what I have found to be universally true is that if the athlete watches the hands during this top part of the jump and watch their hands pull through and past their face, that's a really nice way of making sure that they're focusing on the right things. Stay in strong muscular positions. What I mean by that is the more you throw the head back, the more you keep the back to the bar and let the hands come into this position, the more that's just a really weak position. If you can keep the chin in and turn onto the line of the pole early, that's a really strong muscular position where you can apply force down the pole. And that's what this is all about. We're trying to punch the pole down through the bottom of the box at this point in time and put that energy down the pole so we get it back out of the top of the pole. And as I've already alluded to, if the athlete can turn early enough, they can actually get on the runway side of the pole, but facing the bar, which if you haven't rolled the pole through the vertical is very dangerous. But if you have, it's an absolutely incredible way to get massive vertical pop back off of the pole, excuse me. And then the last thing about this point is that there's times in the vault to be fast, as I've already alluded to, and there's times to be patient. And this is where a lot of people make the mistake of trying to rush this bit of the jump. Once you've got in the tube and you've embraced that energy return from the pole, you've got to ride the pole and be patient and let yourself climb through the top of the jump. And a lot of people try and rush and clear the bar, and that's not what you should be doing at this point in time. Right, pole exit. Last opportunity to apply force. You're going to let go of the pole soon. So once you've done that, you can't apply any more force. It's also the last opportunity to receive any energy back from the pole. So make the most of it. And for me, teaching the hand, wrist, and elbow sequencing of turning through the top of the pole and pushing down the line of the pole is something that's generally not done particularly well. And we have a battery of training exercises, which perhaps is for a future presentation, that we use to teach that sequencing through the top of the jump. But ultimately, we're trying to pull, like I say, down through the pole as the athlete makes the turn and exits the pole, with the bottom hand then releasing first and the top hand pushing down the line of the pole and leaving last. We'll see this all in videos in a minute, guys. Don't panic. This is going to be a great video set coming up in a minute that shows all of this. And then the bar clearance itself, for me, especially with younger novice vaulters, the pike shape around the bar is easy money. I see so many young vaulters going over in a flat position with the tummy down. And for me, just taking the hips upwards, there's 20 centimeters to be had straight away. And Sam Kendricks obviously is amazing at this, but it's just easy money to pike around the bar. So in order to do that, we want to see the feet drop as the athlete moves across the bar, the hips pop, and the chest hollows again. The chest hollows out. If needed, if rotational speed around the bar is becoming an issue, then we also need to shorten the lever, i.e. bend the knees a little bit, or one knee, to increase the rotation speed around the bar. And again, that can be taught in ways where you're not actually pole vaulting and you can play around with it in different gymnastic settings, but that's really important. And Mondo does this really well. His bar awareness and ability to increase his bar speed, his rotation speed around the bar is immense. And then, of course, the last thing is that the arm should come over last, leading with the elbows and smoothly pulling out of the way of the bar. Too much jerky movement at that point in time leads to the chest popping onto the bar or catching the bar with a hand. I even see some people try and take the arms over first and then the head comes over the bar last. That's, to me, that's just madness. Anyway, enough talk. Let's look at some amazing videos of people turning, exiting the pole, and clearing the bar really well. The first one is Bubka doing a 6'11" jump, and this is a little montage I've put together where, I mean, this jump's pretty faultless anyway, but you can really see through the top of the jump how much he does well. Extends, eye position, turn, push down the line of the pole, amazing bar awareness, tucks the legs to increase the bar speed, and then arms come over last of all. But everything that I've just narrated is displayed beautifully in that jump. We're going to see it one more time, really slow. Turning, pushing down the pole, releasing, tucking to increase the bar rotation speed, and then away. Unbelievable. Great example of how to exit the pole, in my opinion. So that's Bubka. Who have we got next? We've got Isinbayeva. She also does some great on-pole work and exits the pole really well. So this is a jump at 485. We'll have to watch this a couple of times. So she doesn't hold the line of the pole quite as well as Bubka, but you can still see that she turns, bends that right elbow so that she can keep applying force down the line of the pole. Bend, pull, turn, push. And again, really, really nice hollowing of the chest from Isinbayeva as well. She gets this really well. Drops the feet, hollows the chest, shape around the bar, arms dangling, arms last to come over the bar. Left hand comes off, right hand comes off, dangle over the bar, bend the legs to increase the rotation. Beautiful stuff. Let's have a look at the man, Sam Kendricks. He's the man for bar clearance at the moment. Hashtag hip height. My least favorite hashtag of all time, but that's another conversation. If you know, you know. Where's jump number 16? Got ya. Here we go, Sam. This is Sam back in Rio. 585, made to look like nothing with an absolutely unbelievable pole exit. Boom. Oh my goodness. Let's watch it again. 585 by a country mile. Look at him come through that eye position. Bang. Turn. Pike. Amazing. Love it. We've got a couple more. We've got Kat Stefanidi, one of the biggest push height women of all time. Jump number 17. Here she is. This is her PB jump, actually. This is from London, 2017. 491, winning jump. Oh, my goodness. Look how aggressive she is, firstly, through the inversion. Then the turn. Her turn on the line of the pole is absolutely incredible. Stays right on the line of the pole. Pulls through, left hand off, push down the pole, right hand off, arm comes over last. Amazing work from Kat. And then the last one, we'll have another look at Mondo's 618 jump. One, because it's cool. And two, because I want you to have a look at how much bar awareness he has to kind of tuck at the end of his, he pikes first, then he tucks to increase his bar speed. Pike, tuck, and then when he tucks, he gets into that nice chest hollow position. And that just increases his rotation and spins him around the bar. Pike, tuck, boom. Amazing. I mean, I don't know how much of that is just repetition and feeling it, but that can definitely be taught. You can definitely teach that. All right, last little section of the presentation, guys. Here we go. We're doing well. It's been a long one, but it's been worth it. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you have as well. Here we go. Okay, last little tribute to Sam here. Best push now of all time, over 1.40 m push, unprecedented. And you can see, particularly in that left-hand picture, what that looks like in terms of that push height off the top of the pole. Unbelievable. It is worth noting, though, that generally the best pushers are also slightly lower grippers. Having a massive grip and pushing high, that's really hard. Mondo's the best at doing it right now, for sure. Bubka and Renault also amazing at doing it on the men's side. But yeah, big grip heights, big push heights combined, tough. Sam goes with a slightly different strategy. He has a lower grip and a massive push, but he finds a way to make it very, very effective. So just a quick recap then. That on-pole technique, all that we've discussed tonight, if we get that right, it can lead, if it's done well, to much bigger push heights, which is a big contribution to our overall vault height. The best pushers in the world, if you want to go and watch them jumps on YouTube, are these guys on the men's side. So Sam, I've already talked about. Paul Burgess from Australia jumped 6 meters using like a 490 grip, pushed 1.30 m. Mondo's got this amazing ability to grip 515 and still push 1.25 m. Otto, who we looked at, pushed 1.20 m, and then Renault and Bubka are both pushing about 1.20 m as well. Those are phenomenal numbers. And then on the women's side, we haven't talked much about Yarosley, but Yarosley Silva from Cuba has pushed 95 centimeters, which is just astronomical. Kat has pushed 90, amazing. Martina Strutz from Germany, very short jumper, just jumping on 430 poles, pushed 80 centimeters. Yelena, when she was breaking world records, 80 centimeters. And of course, Sandy up over 5 meters as well at 75 centimeters. Those sorts of numbers are absolutely mind-boggling push heights. So if you want to go and have a look at some people that have got either great on-pole technique or use very, very stiff poles in relation to their body weight, have a look at some of those guys and you'll see some good stuff. Last little bit, I want to have a look at some what I've called on-pole legends. Some of these will be familiar to you, some of them won't. But essentially, this is just a small collection of half a dozen vaults that really epitomize everything that we've talked about now from start to finish. The setting up the C position, the kick and the whip tap through the bottom of the swing, long through the cord, then rotating around the shoulders into the L position, and then the extension and pole exit through the top of the jump. We've covered a lot tonight, but have a look at some of these jumps just as a bit of a kind of recap on all of the stuff that we've talked about. And hopefully you'll have a good time watching them, but also kind of it'll bring a few of the points home that have resonated with you tonight. So first one, If I can find jump number 19. Where are you, 19? Here he is. Kjell Isaacson from back in the day, 1972, 550 jump, but there's still some amazing on-pole work happening in this jump that would be, a lot of people would be proud of today. Have a look at this swing. Oh my goodness me. Beautiful straight left leg, covers the pole beautifully, closes off with the top arm. Amazing jump. One more time. I know we've not got much time left for Q&A, but we got to watch that again because it's just so good. Watch again. Watch how beautiful this swing is. Inside, C position. The swing leg takes the hips with it beautifully. Oh my goodness, I love it. Right, next one. A lot of people won't heard of this lady. This is Tatiana Polnova, who was quite a slow vaulter. She wasn't particularly fast on the runway, so she had to have amazing on-pole technique to compensate for that. This is, again, only a 430 pole. She jumped 478. This is a jump I videoed in London back in 2009 of her jumping 465. Check this on-pole technique out from Tatiana Polnova. We'll watch this a couple of times as a little montage. Oh, my goodness. That hip roll up above the shoulder. It never stops. And then the line of the pole and push down the pole right on the line. I mean, I want to watch it again. Bang. Takeoff leg whips through, hips roll up on the line of the pole. My goodness me. If only we could all do that, that'd be a dream. Right, next, who we got? We got Steve Hooker. Great on-pole technician. Alex Parnov doing amazing work with a lot of Aussie vaulters over the years with on-pole technique. Come on, clip 22. Oh no, it's clip 21. I got you. I got Hooker. This is 601 jump from World Indoors 2010 in Doha. Have a look at this. C position, bang, whip swing through the bottom of the jump, covers the pole, squeezes, closes off with the top arm, extends I position, turns on the line, bends the top arm, pushes down the pole. I mean, he pumps 601 by 20 centimeters, I reckon, so he doesn't even need to do a bar shape, but unbelievable stuff from Hooker. Love it. Three more. Silke Spiegelberg from Germany. This is a jump at 475, European Indoors in Paris, 2011. Silke does a lot of stuff really well. What a takeoff, but then swing over the top of the pole, turn on the line of the pole, push down the pole. Wow. One more time. Yeah, why not? C position, kick, legs over the top. Drop the knee a little bit there, actually, interestingly. But again, probably a small compensation, just making sure that pole gets in. But amazing jumping from Silke. Love it. Two more. We got Isenbayeva to finish, women's world record holder, jump number 23. Here she comes. This is 493. Again, this was shot in London at the Palace back in the day. This is a 493 jump from start to finish. This is pretty special. Bang, up. And in terms of knowing when to be fast and when to be patient, it doesn't get much better than that. She's super fast through the bottom of the swing, kicks through the bottom, stays long, and then is just so patient through the back end of the jump. All the time in the world. Love it. And then lastly, we've been watching it all night on slow-mo, taking it apart, looking at different pieces of it. Let's have a look at the first ever 6-meter jump by Bubka. It's a very, very special jump. He was an amazing technician. Nice narrow grip here on the pole. Takes off beautifully and then go through it all. C position, kick, whip, over the pole, I position, turn on the line of the pole, pike, arms over last, fly away. Could watch it all day. Absolutely immense. Right. Let's rattle through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. We're done. So just last little bit from me, guys, in terms of some references and bibliography. I haven't actually used this book to put this presentation together, but this has just come out. My copy arrived on Monday. Thanks to Ellie for that. That was amazing. But this is the Pole Vault, a Violent Ballet by David Butler. Amazing mind, thinks about pole vault a lot, and this is a huge book with so much content. If you can get a copy, it's quite expensive and the shipping's quite a lot, but well worth it. I think I've had a quick flick through the last couple of days. Looks awesome. So when I finish with it, you can't borrow it, get your own copy. But no, I'd thoroughly recommend getting hold of a copy if you can. And then the other references, I already mentioned Brian Clymer's work. Go and watch those 3 YouTube videos when you can. A closer look at Bubka's first 6-meter jump, the Clymer technical model, and then what happens in the vault after the toe leaves the ground. Awesome stuff in terms of his mindset around what you should be doing on the pole. Love it. Learned a lot from it. And then, of course, the paper that I've referenced a lot throughout this presentation series is Gunter Tito's work. Bit biomech heavy, but great understanding of the event and everything else. So go and have a read of that if you haven't had a chance to yet. That's it for me. I'm going to keep quiet for a bit and allow Darren to field some questions. It's just me tonight, guys. So just please be nice.
Brilliant, Scott. That was awesome. Loved it. Let's go straight into questions. Question mode. Let's kick off. Digger Graham, you talk about keeping behind the pole at inversion and not letting the pole come around to the left on takeoff. Do you coach having the soft line of the pole directly in front or slightly off to the side?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't know if I specifically coach that. If you see both extremes, sometimes with a right-handed vaulter, especially if somebody's got a really rigid bottom arm, you sometimes see the bend swing to the right before it kicks out to the left. For those guys, I'd probably try and orientate the bend a little bit towards the left. If a vaulter is, specifically having a big pole swing out to the left, then maybe they've got it a bit turned too much to the left at the setup, and they need to straighten it up a bit. Oh, flipping, I'm losing my voice. But ultimately, I'm not sure how much of it is actually related to the pre-bend and where that sits in relation to that kind of front to back plane. I think more of it is around the intention of the vaulter with what they're doing with their hands. Again, I haven't really helped Harry a lot with his on-pole work since we've worked together. He was always a genius on the pole, but the one thing that he did do is whilst he was making his move on the pole, he was losing the pole to the left a lot. And then because of that, separating from the pole and not getting the energy back that he deserved. So the only thing that I've cued him on in terms of his on-pole work is keeping that bend in front of him and being really mindful of it. And that's all it takes for a while, is keeping mindful about where the bend is in relation to you when you're swinging, and making sure that it does go into that left corner of the box. It doesn't want to be way out to the left, but it doesn't want to be straight in front of you either, because then you just end up swinging into the pole, of course. Normally speaking, though, the natural progression of the pole is it goes forwards and then it just kinks slightly left and sits. It swings slightly left and sits in that left corner of the box, and that's what you want. I don't know if I've really answered your question. I've probably dodged it a little bit, but I personally, I don't coach exactly where the athlete sets up and trying to offset. I think there's naturally a bit of variability in it anyway.
Cool. Earlier on, you talked about that top arm, keeping that top arm behind through the L position and maximal pole bend. Do you work on it as well outside jumping? If so, how? So I'm assuming away from the bar.
Yeah, that's a good question. How can you work on that? Again, I think it's really hard to explain, because obviously you do want the anterior chain engaged, but it's not about cranking that arm forwards. So yeah, we will do a few exercises where you're trying to think about rolling upwards into inversion, but without applying too much forward pressure with this arm. And if you are applying any forward pressure, it's actually an isometric pressure where you're actually pushing the shoulders back down against this as the kind of resistance, as opposed to keeping the shoulders still and cranking that arm forwards, if that makes sense. So, and we've got things like the rock back machine that I can't remember what it's called actually. One of these things that hangs on the high bar and blocks the shoulders and allows the athletes to roll up nicely from that position. You can help them achieve quite nice positions by pushing the shoulders actually forwards underneath the bar more during invert, so that they can roll up with their arm actually behind them. We also have a couple of other little gizmos and gadgets that we help that kind of bridge the gap between pure gymnastics and pole vault. But if you want a bit more information on that, then things like the bent metal pole that we use and other bits and pieces like that, then yeah, drop me an email. I can send you some of that stuff. It isn't super easy. It's probably easier to work on it conceptually with athletes and just discourage bad behaviors and set up good swinging moments, as opposed to actually trying to think about leaving that arm behind. I don't know what would happen if you actually thought about leaving that behind. It's more about just not cranking it forwards. That's the point.
Being patient.
Yes.
See, I was listening. And this question from Sam, it's probably similar. What is your favorite exercises for improving shoulder range on the takeoff arm? And again, that probably links to a similar question, previous question.
Yeah, Sam, there's loads, but it's not just about range. You have to have strength through range as well, right? So you start off by getting the range, and then you move on to exercises that create strength in that range. So we would be doing lots of exercises, kind of sweeping and opening through here, and you can do that in a myriad of ways. Partner spotting you on a high bar, somebody getting behind you on the wall bars, using a back arch stretcher, lying on the ground on your front, somebody lifting your hands up with a piece of pole in between them, so on and so forth. You just have to get super creative. There's loads of ways of trying to increase that kind of range there, but it's important that it's the right kind of range. You don't want it coming from the lumbar spine. You want to coming from the shoulder and a little bit through the thoracic spine. That's the kind of key to getting into that C position. And then, like I say, once you've done that, you need to start using it in more dynamic ways. So doing chest through swings on the high bar, doing chest through swings into inverts, doing swings on the rings into inversion where you're first going into a C position. It's all those kind of examples of getting into that position and then coming back out of it. Now, don't get me wrong. I also used a straight on pullover exercise in the weight room, but not as a specific technical exercise. I'm not trying to encourage pulling over. I'm just trying to increase strength in those key positions where you need it and into range. So we will do straight on pullovers into shoulder flexion and resist load in this space using bungees, using weights, using plates, both slow movements, isometric movements, kind of dynamic movements, all sorts of variants on that, but more around physical preparation for those movements as opposed to a specific technical preparation, because I'm not trying to cue that in the jump.
Cool. Somebody's asking around the copy of the book. I think what we'll do is we'll send out a link or the name of the book and the author of it.
Yes, here it is. Yeah, I had to. Well, my thanks were to Ellie, because Ellie ordered it from David directly. If you guys use social media, there's a group on Facebook. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I'll find it right now. Technology, eh? There's a group on Facebook where David is essentially the author of the book. Of the group. The Vault: How Bamboo, Steel, and Fiberglass Changed Our Lives. So that is a pole vault mecca on Facebook, and it's run by David Butler, who's the author of the book. And if you go onto that Facebook group and contact David, he can sort you out with a copy. So you can order it through him. He'll have to ship it. If there's a bunch of you that want copies, you can reduce shipping by sharing orders and ordering multiple copies at the same time. Like I say, it's not a cheap book, but I think it'll be well worth it. It looks awesome.
Cool. Got a nice question from Aaron, who's under 15 vaulter. Is it good for young athletes to get their invert technique as soon as possible?
I mean, we're going to talk about this with Alan Richardson in next month about what the prerequisites are for young vaulters to learn before they kind of get to the age, let's say 18 as an arbitrary figure. And I think learning concepts around swinging on a pole are super important for young people. But my fear is, Aaron, that people get very hung up at a young age on what on-pole technique looks like, which is understandable because it's cool, because it's sexy, because it's the bit that everybody gets really enthusiastic about. But ultimately, just bear this in mind. If you're going to vault 6 meters as a man, 5 meters of that comes from grip height and 1 meter of that comes from push height. So you've just got to bear in mind that the run, the takeoff, and all the things that happen on the ground are probably going to make a bigger contribution to the jump than the actual on-pole technique. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Having said that, if you don't learn any on-pole technique until you get to the age of 18, trying to catch that up and learn on-pole technique later in life is really, really difficult. So for me, for athletes and coaches, it's definitely a balancing act between, we've got this monster event with so many components, and what do we teach early on? So for me, I would be teaching at a young age basic principles of how to swing, because we need to create a nice swinging action on the pole, and that will come from some movements in the gymnastics area. If you can get access to a gymnastics training center or even some basic gymnastics equipment, just learn how to swing on some rings, learn how to swing on the high bar, learn how to swing on the parallel bars, just learn how to swing, and then translate some of those swinging actions to the pole so that it becomes a swinging event, not a muscular event. That's the first thing. As for the invert technique itself, I wouldn't obsess about it on the pole, because it's really hard to do for young vaulters when you haven't got much energy and much pole speed, much recoil speed coming back at you anyway. I would be more worried about, learning the movement patterns and the sequences with drills and exercises away from the jump. And then when you have enough speed, power, and dynamism in the vault itself, you can then exploit that by executing movement patterns that you've already learned away from the jump. It's kind of like, you know, building the roof of the house whilst you're laying the foundations, and then when the foundations and the house is built, you just take the roof and put it straight on. That's how I would kind of think about it. So I hope that's kind of answered your question in a roundabout way. On-pole technique is important, but it's absolutely not the be-all and end-all. Get the basics right in terms of swinging ideas, and then we can refine that once you get kind of a little bit older.
Cool. Just going back to that book, Dugay's kindly posted that book link on Facebook, so you guys can be able to find that on the chat. Stephen, we talked about timing of the Volter in relation to the pole. How do you manage this timing constantly as changing as the Volter is moving up to bigger and stiffer poles?
Yeah, I mean, great question. But ultimately, I'm trying to work towards a model where it doesn't really change, because as the athlete is moving on to bigger and stiffer poles, ultimately ultimately they're only, how do I explain this? Their physicality is allowing them to do that with the same sorts of timings. That's the model that I would work to. So if an athlete is capable of gripping 420 off of 12 steps, then when an athlete then goes back to 14 steps and has more speed, they can take a 430 grip on a bigger pole without the timing actually changing at all. And so in my experience, that's what I've been able to create with the way that I've kind of been able to coach the event, is that the timings stay pretty constant. And then we manipulate the other variables around run up length, grip height, pole selection to almost fit the athlete's speed of jump. Unless when I first start to work with an athlete, that their timing and their speed is really out of whack with what I believe that they need to do. So if they're delaying their swing by loads, then I will drop their grip to start with and change them down poles and get them to start initiating their swing a lot earlier in the jump, let's say, for example, and manipulate it that way. And then once I've got a stable model, then I will start to grow the grip height back out. So yeah, I try not to mess with athlete swing timing too much. I try to make that the constant, and then I make the other variables around, grip, pole selection, run up length, ultimately the speed parameters coming into the takeoff. I try and make that fit the athlete's jump. Hope that kind of makes sense without dodging the question.
Cool. Catherine's got a nice question. So many basic swinging strength exercises are slow. Do you use these to develop the strength, even though it creates a muscular swing? But it doesn't create the speed of the whipping in the swing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I would, it's the same as any physical preparation exercise. You're using a number of different exercises throughout the kind of force velocity curve, and you're using those for different reasons in terms of shaping, strengthening, but then also development of kind of speed and power qualities at the other end of the continuum. And yeah, I think you can get pretty close to swing speeds using, dynamic exercises, particularly on the high bar and the rings, as long as you're kind of setting them up in the right way and really kind of thinking about creating stretch through the bottom before you initiate the swing itself. And for me, that's where the elasticity comes from. It's through creating that tension and stretch through the front of the body that creates that whipping action into invert. And I think you can get pretty close to that using the gymnastics equipment that replicates the speeds on the pole. Like I did say earlier, though, we have come up with a few nice little bits of kit that bridge the gap a little bit between pure gymnastics and pole vaulting. Things like the bent metal pole and other kind of devices like that are really, really useful for the athletes translating gymnastic concepts to pole vaulting, because sometimes that crossover isn't, or that transfer of skill isn't always there. But I would use a continuum of exercises in almost every physical preparation domain, from slow, controlled, strength-based exercises right the way through to very fast, explosive speed power exercises, if movement competency is in place to support it.
Cool. As a summary, could you name two of the best technical parameters of London Bootcamp Master the Best on the pole?
Oh. On the pole. I mean, Bubka, when he was rolling, is ultimately, in terms of my picture of the technical model, is actually pretty close to being flawless in terms of what I would be aspiring to teach. his ability to swing. You know, Petrov and him did some amazing work on just the understanding of how to swing with absolutely no passive phases whatsoever. He's constantly moving in his best jumps through his swing, and because of those no passive phases, there's very, very little energy lost whatsoever, and that is an unbelievable skill that he has. But it would be harder for me to find fault with Bubka's jumps than it would be to kind of pick out some things that I think he's really exceptional at. All of his jump from start to finish is for me pretty amazing. His last 2 foot contacts sometimes aren't great, a little bit toey, and yeah, but other than that, it's really, really good stuff. Mondo, on the other hand, very unorthodox style, but his genius comes from he puts incredible speed onto the pole through the takeoff, which I know isn't on pole, but even though he has some unorthodox stuff with his plant and his pole drop and everything else, he puts amazing speed through the takeoff, which he uses later in the jump, perhaps better than anybody else that I've seen. But also through repetition of jumps over a really long period of time, he has unbelievable feeling on the pole. His awareness in the jump is amazing. I rarely see Mondo bail out of a jump, kind of like Renault. He always finds ways to make the jump work, and it's just so, the output of the jump is just so dialed. He can just rep jumps out endlessly at a very, very high level because he's just got so many different little strategies for adjusting and manipulating his jump throughout the jump to create ultimately the same outcome. And that's the key for elite performers, is that variability within the jump system is actually reasonably high, but the outcome is super consistent because they have strategies for dealing with it. So even though that's not really much that I've spoken about tonight in terms of specific technical elements, they're both, you know, world record holders jumping, you know, 620 in the air. So they're both obviously doing amazing stuff. But I wouldn't pick out 1 or 2 things necessarily in that space. You know, Mondo is super dynamic coming out from his tuck and shoot position and lining up with the pole. You know, as it recoils, that's exceptional. And yeah, Bubka's just whole on pole technique is just, it's just absolutely beautiful. His C position, his ability to swing, like him and Petrov did an amazing job creating that.
Cool. Well, Scott, that's us for the questions for this evening.